Welcome to the Story King, where every tale begins with magic and ends with wonder. The silver blade pressed against Sera's throat was still warm from her stepsister's hand. "If you dare show your face at the Moon Festival tonight," Celeste hissed, her breath hot with malice, "I'll tell father you've been sneaking into the Alpha King's territory. You know what happens to trespassers." Sera's pulse hammered beneath the knife's edge. The threat was empty. She'd never crossed into forbidden lands, but truth had never mattered in her stepmother's house. Not since her father remarried 3 years ago, transforming her childhood home into a gilded prison where she existed only to serve. "I understand," Sera whispered, and Celeste's triumphant smile carved itself into her memory. But Sera had no intention of obeying. The Moon Festival came only once every decade, when the 3 moons aligned and the veil between the mortal and supernatural realms grew thin. It was the night when the Alpha King chose his court, when fortunes changed with a single glance, when even the lowest servant girl could dare to dream. Sera had been preparing for this night her entire life. She waited until the house fell silent, until her stepmother, Celeste, and her other stepsister Margot had departed in their carriage dripping with jewels and entitlement. Then she retrieved the dress she'd been sewing in secret for months, a gown of midnight blue that seemed to capture starlight itself, stitched during stolen hours when her hands should have been resting from scrubbing floors and tending fires. The festival grounds sprawled across the valley like a dream made manifest. Lanterns floated without strings, their light casting everything in ethereal silver. Music wove through the air, not quite heard but felt in the bones. Sera kept her cloak drawn tight as she navigated through crowds of nobles and merchants, werewolves and humans mingling in rare harmony under the moon's protection. She didn't notice the eyes tracking her movement through the crowd, eyes that glowed amber in the darkness. The central pavilion rose before her, its silk walls billowing in a wind that carried the scent of night-blooming jasmine and something wilder, more primal. Sera's heart climbed into her throat as she approached. This was where the Alpha King would make his appearance, where? Well, what filth has crawled into our presence? Sera's blood froze. Her stepmother, Lady Vivian, materialized from the crowd like a specter, resplendent in crimson silk that matched the cruelty in her eyes. Celeste and Margot flanked her, their expressions promising violence. "I told you to stay home," Celeste snarled, reaching for Sera's cloak. "She probably stole the dress," Margot added, her voice carrying to nearby onlookers who were beginning to stare. "Guards, this girl is a thief." "I am no thief," Sera said quietly, but her voice was drowned by her stepmother's theatrical gasp. "How dare you show your face here and embarrass this family?" Lady Vivian's hand shot out, gripping Sera's arm with bruising force. "You were told to know your place, you ungrateful wretch. Your father would be ashamed." "My father would be ashamed of what you've become," Sera said, and the words surprised even herself. The slap came swift and sharp, snapping her head to the side. The crowd gasped. Sera stumbled backward, her vision swimming, and felt hands pushing her further away from the pavilion, away from her only chance at freedom. "Remove her," Lady Vivian commanded the nearby guards. "She's disturbed enough of the festival with her desperate attention-seeking." Sera's eyes burned, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here, not in front of them. She turned to go, to disappear into the crowd and nurse her shattered dreams in private, when, "Stop," the single word cut through the night like a blade through silk. The crowd parted as if compelled by invisible hands. The music faltered and died. Even the floating lanterns seemed to still in the drift. He emerged from the shadows like moonlight given form, the Alpha King himself, Kylan Silvercrest, the most powerful werewolf in 5 territories. Sera had only heard stories, whispered tales of his ruthlessness in battle and his merciless judgment of those who defied pack law. They said he could see through any deception, that his eyes could strip away pretense and lay bare the truth of a person's soul. Those eyes, amber and ancient and utterly inhuman, were fixed on her. He moved with predatory grace, his presence commanding absolute attention. He wore ceremonial black threaded with silver that caught the moonlight, and power radiated from him in waves that made Sera's knees weak. This was an alpha in his prime, a king in truth as well as title. "Your Majesty," Lady Vivian dropped into an elaborate curtsy, her voice dripping with honey. "Please forgive the disturbance. My stepdaughter has forgotten her place and—" Silence. Lady Vivian's mouth snapped shut as if pulled by strings. Kylan stopped directly before Sera. This close, she could see the silver flecks in his amber eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin despite the cool night air. He studied her with an intensity that should have been frightening but instead felt like recognition. "You're injured," he said, his voice rough velvet. His hand rose toward her face, toward the place where her stepmother's slap had left its mark, and Sera flinched instinctively. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Who struck you?" The question was deceptively soft. Sera's throat closed. She could feel her stepmother's glare like daggers in her back, could practically hear the threats that would come later if she spoke the truth. But something in the Alpha King's gaze demanded honesty. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "It matters to me." 4 words, but they carried the weight of absolute authority. Kylan turned his attention to Lady Vivian, and Sera watched her stepmother's face drain of color. "You dare strike a guest at the Moon Festival?" His voice dropped to a growl that resonated with his wolf. "During the sacred alignment, explain yourself quickly, and perhaps I'll grant you exile instead of execution." "She's no guest." Lady Vivian's composure cracked. "She's my stepdaughter, a servant girl with delusions of grandeur. She has no right to be here." "No right." Kylan's laugh was hollow and bitter. "The Moon Festival welcomes all who come in peace. Or have you forgotten that even I began as nothing more than the rejected son of a fallen alpha?" The crowd murmured. Sera stared. She hadn't known that about him. The stories always painted him as born to power. Kylan returned his attention to Sera, and this time his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "What is your name?" "Sera Ashwood, Your Majesty." "Sera." He spoke her name like he was tasting it, testing how it felt on his tongue. "Tell me, Sera Ashwood, why did you come to the Moon Festival?" The honest answer would sound foolish. "Because I'm desperate, because I'm drowning, because I hoped for magic and miracles." But something about his steady gaze pulled the truth from her. "Because I refuse to accept that my life is only what others decide it should be," she said. "Because once every 10 years, the impossible becomes possible. Because I had to try." Something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or understanding. He extended his hand to her, palm up, an invitation. "Then let them see you try." Sera stared at his outstretched hand. Behind her, she could hear her stepmother's sharp intake of breath, could feel the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. This was a test, she realized. A choice. She could refuse, could bow and scrape and return to her place in the shadows. Or she could be brave for once in her life. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, steady, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. A jolt of something electric passed between them, and from the way his eyes widened slightly, he felt it too. The mate bond. It couldn't be, shouldn't be. Humans didn't bond with werewolves, and servant girls certainly didn't bond with kings. But the 3 moons above them blazed brighter, as if in confirmation. Kylan raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat spiraling through her entire body. "I, Kylan Silvercrest, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, claim this woman under my protection. Any who move against her move against me." The declaration rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Lady Vivian made a strangled sound. Celeste looked ready to faint. Margot's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. But Kylan paid them no attention. He tucked Sera's hand into the crook of his elbow and led her toward the pavilion, toward the center of the festival, toward a future she'd never dared imagine. His touch remained gentle, protective, his body angled slightly as if to shield her from the stares and whispers that followed. "You're trembling," he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Good, that means you understand the magnitude of what just happened." He glanced down at her, and for just a moment, the ruthless king disappeared, replaced by something almost tender. "But you don't need to be afraid of me, Sera. Not ever." They reached the center of the pavilion, where the moonlight concentrated into a beam of pure silver. Tradition dictated that the Alpha King would dance with his chosen court members beneath the aligned moons, sealing bonds of loyalty and power. But Kylan showed no interest in the nobles clamoring for his attention. He pulled Sera into his arms as the music swelled, one hand at her waist, the other still clasping hers. "Just follow my lead," he said, and then they were moving. Sera had never danced like this, had only watched from the shadows as others twirled and swayed. But with Kylan guiding her, it felt effortless, natural, as if their bodies had always known this rhythm. He held her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, and smell his scent, pine and rain and something wildly masculine. "Why?" she asked as they spun beneath the moons. "Why did you choose me?" His expression grew serious. "Do you believe in fate, Sera?" "I believe in choice." Wise answer. His thumb traced circles on her waist, a gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. "But sometimes fate and choice are the same thing. The moment you walked into this festival, I felt you. Your presence called to my wolf like nothing ever has. And when I saw them hurt you..." His jaw tightened. "I wanted to tear them apart. You barely know me. I know enough." He pulled her closer, his lips near her ear. "I know you're brave enough to defy those who would break you. I know you came here seeking possibility. I know that when you placed your hand in mine, you felt what I felt." The mate bond. He was confirming it, acknowledging what should have been impossible. "What happens now?" Sera whispered. Kylan's eyes gleamed with something fierce and possessive. Now I take you back to my palace. I give you a choice: walk away and I'll ensure you're provided for, comfortable, free of those who've hurt you. Or," he paused, his gaze intense, "or you stay, you let me court you properly, as you deserve. You give us a chance to explore this connection between us, and my stepmother will never touch you again. That, I promise." The music was ending, the dance drawing to a close. Soon they would step apart and Sera would have to make her choice. Part of her screamed that this was madness, that you couldn't trust fairy tales, that powerful men didn't really save desperate girls. But another part of her, the part that had survived years of cruelty without breaking, the part that had dared to come to the festival despite everything, that part recognized something true in Kylan's eyes. She began. A scream shattered the night. The crowd erupted into chaos. Sera spun to see a figure emerging from the tree line, multiple figures, moving with inhuman speed. Rogues, werewolves who'd rejected pack law, who lived only for violence and blood. And they were heading straight for the pavilion. Kylan moved instantly, pushing Sera behind him as his body began to shift, bones cracking and reforming. Around them, other wolves responded to the threat, but the rogues were already upon them. Blood sprayed. Someone close by went down with a gurgling scream. Then Sera saw her, Celeste, frozen in terror as a massive rogue wolf bore down on her, jaws wide and eager. For all the cruelty her stepsister had shown her, Sera couldn't watch her die. She didn't think, she just moved. She threw herself forward, grabbing a fallen ceremonial spear, and thrust it upward just as the rogue's weight crashed into her. The impact drove her to the ground, the wolf's hot breath on her face, its claws raking across her shoulder in burning lines of agony. Then the weight was gone. Kylan, in his massive silver wolf form, had the rogue by the throat, shaking it like a rag doll before tossing it aside. His wolf turned to her, and she saw intelligence and fury in those amber eyes, saw him checking her for injuries. The wound on her shoulder burned. The rogue's claws had been deep, but it was the look on Kylan's wolf face, pure, unfiltered rage and fear, that made her realize the truth. She'd been scratched by a werewolf. During the moon festival, under the aligned moons, the impossible was about to become very, very possible. As consciousness began to slip away, the last thing Sera saw was Kylan shifting back to human form, gathering her into his arms, his voice rough with emotion as he commanded, "Get her to my personal healer. Now, and someone find out who sent those rogues, because this was no random attack." The world faded to silver moonlight and amber eyes. When she woke, if she woke, she would no longer be quite human. And someone had made certain of it. Thank you for reading with the Story King, where every ending is just a new beginning. Follow for more tales that will keep you spellbound.